Hey everybody, it's your old pal Tom here on the Tom Gulley Show. Let me tell you about the Hays Code. What's the Hays Code, you may be wondering? Well, the Hays Code is the code that governed Hollywood in terms of nasty things that you could or couldn't do in the movies. I'm going to tell you why. When there was a man and a woman in a bedroom, and they were both sitting on the edge of the bed, or one was laying down, one person's foot had to be on the floor just to keep things wholesome. I'm going to tell you how the Catholic Church, yes, the Catholic Church, pretty much defined what was allowable and what was not allowable in the movies for over 30 years. I'm going to tell you why you hardly ever saw anybody with their shirt off in a movie. A dude. They're always wearing one of those wife beaters or something. I'm going to tell you all of that stuff and more. All sorts of old-timey reasons people did old-timey things to keep things morally old-timey for a long, long time. Of course, this is our cold open, where I normally tell an amusing anecdote of some kind. Today I'm going to use this time for our audio podcast listeners. I'm going to play some songs in a second. And if you're watching this on demand on YouTube and not live, or you're listening to our audio podcast, fear not, you can just fast forward through this right to the meat of the show. But a lot of people find this very, very exciting, the cold open. And they should today, because today I am going to right a wrong. That's right. Not often you get to right a wrong, but that's what I'm going to do. I'm hesitant to do it because the person who I'm righting the wrong for, I don't see in our chat room, but, that's kind of their fault, so who cares? Our good friend, the chef, who's one of the best supporters of the show that you could possibly imagine. He actually is kind of like a member of my family. He worked at a restaurant with my sisters when they were back in high school. So he's been associated with our family for a long time. I, for the past several weeks, have been saying that this chef works at the Skyline Club in Indianapolis, which is a very high-end restaurant. It's also very high in the sky. That's why they call it the Skyline Club. It's 40 stories in the sky, which for Indianapolis is that's a big deal. So I had forgotten, he told me, because he used to be the chef there. Now he's the chef, or a chef, one of the chefs, at a different place. And that place is called Geraldine's in Indianapolis. It's just off of Fountain Square. They're on English Street. And whenever I'm in Indianapolis, I always make it a point to stop at Geraldine's Supper Club and Lounge. I'm showing you some of the delicious items that they make and sell there. That's a dirty chai-tini there. I don't even know what a dirty chai-tini is, but I want one. And I don't even drink. But it looks delicious. And that is a chicken scallopini. I'm sure the chef makes those. This is a Wagyu beef. It looks like tomahawk steak with gravy and other things. This right here is some sort of steak that's really good. I can't tell which kind of steak it is. Somebody else could tell. Maybe it's prime. I don't know what it is. It just looks really good. And these are spinach puffs. I'm getting hungry already. So I feel better now. I've righted that wrong. We can all go back to our lives, but it's Geraldine's. That's where Mikey and Josh and the rest of them all work. And they listen to the show while they're doing prep and other things. So there you go. I've righted that wrong. And now that the wrong has been righted, I got a couple songs for you to let people file into the chat room, which they're currently not doing. It's a Saturday. And then, let me tell you, about the Hays Code.
Tom steps in shining, lifting spirits in the room. The wolf's already laughing with that friendly boom. Chef's in the kitchen, keeping everybody fed. Scott from Australia nods his bearded head. Rumple trench coat enters with a mystery to unfold. Tom brings the warmth, turning every moment gold. Once you go gully, you never recover fully. When the world feels unsteady, Tom will get you ready. Once you go gully, you never recover fully. Tom puts on the show, let the good times roll. The wolf keeps up grooving with that easy midnight sway. Chef spins a ladle like when leading cabaret. Scott from Australia brings the thunder to the floor. Rumpled trench coat squints like he's seen this all before. Tom hits the rhythm and the whole room starts to move. Every single heartbeat falling deeper in the groove. Once you go gully, you never recover fully. When the world feels unsteady, Tom will get you ready. Once you go gully, you never recover fully. Tom puts on the show, let the good times roll. Oh, hey, oh, yeah, yeah. When the lights turn low, Tom keeps the moment bright, lifting every spirit as they dance into the night. Once you go gully, you never recover fully. When the world feels unsteady, Tom will get you ready. Once you go gully, you never recover fully. Tom puts on the show, let the good times roll. Once you go gully, you never recover fully. When the world feels unsteady, Tom will get you ready. Once you go gully, you never recover fully. Tom puts on the show, let the good times roll. Tom Gulley's got a mic in his hand. Ooh, yeah. Talking Bigfoot tracks in the sand. Hole punches, fighters, conspiracies tight. He's podcasting strong, deep into the night. From the man from UNCLE to the Motown scene. He's dropping gems like you never seen. Oh, you know Tom Gulley, he's the podcast king. Say what? Ladies man with a smooth, sweet swing. Bigfoot, spider, and 9/11 schemes. Tom's a man of your wildest dreams. Tom Gulley, he's got charm, got wit, and a silky flow. Oh yeah, talking mysteries only Tom would know. From R&B
Hey everybody, what's going on? What's hot? What's hip? What's happening? What's shaking? Let me tell you about the Hays Code, the thing that kept all the dirty stuff out of movies. And it did it from 1922 to 1945, and it did it like way too much. And our good friends in the Catholic Church were behind the whole thing. And they didn't even try to hide it. It's crazy. Wait do you hear about all this stuff? They had a list of things you could do, a list of things you couldn't do. It's trust me, you're not going to believe it. Before we get going, please like, share, subscribe, retweet, notification bell. These are tiny little things you can do. They only cost you a click, and they help our show so much with the algorithm. It's just kind of like the Hays Code of the digital age. Plus, we have super chats, we have memberships, we have gifted memberships. If you look in our YouTube description, we've got the PayPal, we've got the TomGulleyShow.com, where there's all sorts of stuff for you there, including our merchandise store. Anything you want with the show's logo on it, it's probably there. If you search long enough, it's probably there. Let's go to our chat room very quickly. Crappy at Life is here. Happy to be here. He's on again about Bruce Springsteen. I don't know why. Guido Samurai is here. He says he is snowed in, which is unfortunate. I hope you're unsnowed in very quickly. Yesterday here in Dallas, it was 79 degrees. I spoke to my fada this morning. It's 16 in Indianapolis. So speaking of Indianapolis, Chef and the whole crew is in the house. And I hope they were tuned in at the top of the show when I said, I'm wrong. I've been saying they're in the wrong restaurant. They work at Geraldine's, the premier steakhouse in Indianapolis, just off Fountain Square on English Avenue there. And I showed pictures of all the delicious stuff that they have there. They've got this, they've got the steak frites. They've got the chaitini, the dirty chaitini, which the Hays Code would probably have a problem with. They've got the scallopini there of some kind. They've got the Wagyu beef, looks like maybe a tomahawk. I don't know what it is. Somebody will say it's got gravy on it. Looks delicious. They've got other delicious meat. And then the spinach puffs, which look amazing there, all at Geraldine's. When in Indianapolis, guests of the Tom Gulley Show eat at Geraldine's, by God, and nowhere else. What else we got in the chat room here? We have Crappy at Life saying algorithm boosting super chat, which is great. It's $5. Thank you so much, Crappy at Life. He says it's like a super chat, but misspelled. It's super char, which I guess they could do for you at Geraldine's. I don't know. They could probably do just about anything you want there. So let's talk just a little bit about, yes, the Hays Code. The Motion Picture Production Code, that's the official name. It was a set of industry guidelines for the self-censorship of content that was applied to most motion pictures released by major studios in the United States from 1934 to 1968. Now, it was self-censorship because the movie industry didn't want the government to censor them. Although there were censorship boards in some of the individual states, the Hays Code covered all the movies everywhere. Now, it's known as the Hays Code for a very good reason. It was named after, yes, Will H. Hays. And he looks like a lot of fun, doesn't he? He looks like somebody whizzed in his Coke or something. He was the president of the Motion Picture Producers and Distributors of America. And he was the president from 1922 to 1945. That later became the Motion Picture Association of America, and it's now known as the Motion Picture Association. And they adopted the production code, the Hays Code, in 1930. All right? Now, this whole thing was because in the 1920s, Hollywood was rocked by a number of very, very notorious scandals. You got to remember, in the 1920s, most of the United States lived on farms. In the big cities, a lot of the people that lived in the United States were immigrants and were very, very religious. So, although in the 20s, in the silent era, the movies had actually extremely mature subject matter. I know you're thinking silent movies, it's tame and it's, wacky comedies and stuff, but that's not exactly true. They got away with a lot of stuff in the 20s. And during this time, there were scandals off screen. There was the alleged grape and manslaughter of Virginia Rapp by popular movie star Fatty Arbuckle. Huge scandal. It was a giant party. She was with a bunch of guys and mostly Fatty Arbuckle, and she winds up dead. There was the murder of William Desmond Taylor, which was another big scandal. And a lot of people felt the film industry had always had morally questionable values. And so there were a lot of states that introduced film censorship bills. And the movie industry said, we don't want any part of that. So what did they do? They went out and they got this Presbyterian elder, Will Hayes. And he was also the Postmaster General under Warren G. Harding and the former head of the Republican National Committee. And they said, buddy, we want you to rehabilitate Hollywood's image. And they were doing this in large part because of something we covered just a few weeks ago, when Kennesaw Mountain Landis became the commissioner of baseball and cleaned up baseball. Now, Hayes was paid a lot of money for that time. $100,000 a year, which was almost $2 million in today's money. And he did it for 25 years, where he defended the industry from attacks, recited soothing nostrums, and negotiated treaties to cease hostilities. In 1924, he introduced a set of recommendations that he called the formula. And studios were to follow the formula. Okay? And he went so far as to ask filmmakers to submit to his office the plots of the movies they were planning on producing. So before they had shot an inch of film, he was like, no, I want to know what you're doing here. Okay, pal? I want to know. All right? In 1915, the Supreme Court had already decided unanimously in a case called Mutual Film Corporation versus the Industrial Commission of Ohio that free speech did not extend to motion pictures. Now, there had been some attempts to clean things up after that, but none of them worked, okay? By the 1920s, the stage productions in New York, which were a frequent source of movies, they would make stage plays into movies. The stage had topless shows, performances were filled with curse words, very adult subject matter, and extremely suggestive sexual dialogue, okay? They weren't messing around. Early in the sound era, talkies, it was very apparent that what was acceptable on the stage in New York wouldn't really go over very well in, say, Iowa. So what to do about it? The movies said, we'd like to censor ourselves. We don't want the government doing this, right? So it was suggested to studio executives that they form a committee to discuss the film censorship, right? And they came up with a list that they called don'ts and be carefuls, based on the things they were hearing from the hinterlands. And this list was actually approved by the Federal Trade Commission, right? And so Hayes created something called the Studio Relations Committee to oversee all this. But they didn't really have any way to actually enforce any of this, right? And I'm going to tell you right now what the don'ts and the be carefuls are, all right? This is a poster that kind of made fun of it, but those things which are included in the following list shall not appear in pictures produced by the members of this association, irrespective of the manner in which they are treated. These are things the Hayes people said you cannot ever, ever, ever do. Number 1 was pointed profanity, either by title or lip, in case it was a silent movie or the name of a movie. It couldn't be in any titles. This includes the words God, Lord, Jesus, Christ, unless they be reverently in connection with proper religious ceremonies, hell, SOB, damn, God with a W, and every other profane and vulgar expression, however it may be spelled. Number 2, any licentious or suggestive nudity, in fact or in silhouette, and any lecherous or licentious notice thereof by any other character in the picture. And I'll point out to you that in the silent days, I'll even show you, this is a scene from a movie in the silent days, and you could see that chick is naked. She is naked. I know it's from the side, but that's a naked lady right there. So sort of. She's got flowers and things, but couldn't do that no more. That's not allowed anymore. Number 3, the illegal traffic in drugs. Number 4, any inference of sex perversion. Number 5, white slavery. Number 6, a little something called miscegenation, and that means race mixing. Can't be having that. Number 7 was sex hygiene and venereal diseases. Number 8, scenes of actual childbirth, in fact or in silhouette. Number 10 was ridicule of the clergy. And number 11, and this became a big deal, willful offense to any nation, race, or creed. And those were things you could never, ever, 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 under any circumstances do. Okay? Now, there was another section called the be carefuls. And special care must be exercised in the manner in which the following subjects are treated, to the end that vulgarity and suggestiveness may be eliminated and that good taste may be emphasized. It's very moral, very, very religious. Number 1 was use of the flag. We don't want you messing with the flag. Number 2, and this was a big deal, particularly when, I don't know, a guy by the name of Hitler came along. Number 2 was international relations, avoiding picturization in an unfavorable light another country's religion, history, institutions, prominent people, and citizenry. Number 3 was religion and religious ceremonies. Be careful. Number 4, arson. Yes, arson. Number 5 was the use of firearms. Yes, the use of firearms. I had a really good photo for this one, but I can't find it right now. Yeah, they didn't want you to be using firearms so I think maybe I didn't even use it, because actually YouTube would probably crack down on this picture that I have been. Number 6 was theft, robbery, safe cracking, and dynamiting of trains, mines, buildings, etc. Having in mind the effect, this is amazing that they put this into words. Having in mind the effect which a too detailed description of these may have upon the moron. I'm not joking. That's what it says. Okay? They didn't want you to show how to steal, rob, safecrack, dynamite a train. Anyway, 7 is brutality and possible gruesomeness. 8 is the technique of committing murder by whatever method. 9, methods of smuggling. 10, third-degree methods, or tortures, what they're talking about there. 11, actual hangings or electrocutions as legal punishments for crime. 12, this is a big one, sympathy for criminals. Now, I'll just go ahead and tell you, kind of, get it out of the way. If a criminal was sort of the star of the movie, which a lot of movies had them, gangsters movies in the 30s, the most exciting and the main character of a movie could be a criminal. The person that you thought was the coolest and it was, the main point of the movie. If you did that, you had to show them paying for their crimes. And that's why in a lot of the gangster movies, at the end, the gangster dies, because that's how they got away with it. Number 13, attitude toward public characters and institutions. Number 14 was sedition, okay, which basically means rebellion against the government. Number 15, apparent cruelty to children and animals. Number 16, branding of people or animals. Number 17, the sale of women or a woman selling her virtue. So if you were going to show a woman of ill repute, you had to imply it. You couldn't overtly state it. Number 19, what they called first night scenes. Basically, if you've ever seen the Clark Gable movie where he takes a sheet and puts it on a string between the two beds, that's why that scene is in there, to show them. And then the 20 is a man and a woman in bed together. You had to be careful with that. You really couldn't show that. So that's why a lot of people got around that by, if a woman was in bed and a man was coming over to the bed, he had to sit on the edge of the bed or show that he had one foot on the floor so they couldn't, Number 21 was the deliberate seduction of girls. Number 22 was the institution of marriage. They didn't want open marriages. Number 23, and I guess they had a big thing about showing actual medical stuff, because number 23 was surgical operations. Number 24, the use of drugs. Number 25, titles or scenes having to do with law enforcement or law enforcing officers. And that just means that you really couldn't show cops that were on the take, Number 26, excessive or lustful kissing, particularly when one character or the other is a heavy. You really couldn't show it at all, but you super couldn't show it if one of them was a bad person. It's a very, very bad person. So, in 1929, Catholic layman Martin Quigley, editor of the prominent trade paper Motion Picture Herald, and Jesuit priest Father Daniel A. Lord created a code of standards and submitted it to the studios. Father Lord was particularly concerned with the effects of sound film on children who he thought were extremely susceptible to the lure of the motion picture. In February of 1930, several studio heads, including MGM and its head, Irving Thalberg, met with Lord and Quigley. After some revisions, they agreed to the stipulations of the Hays Code. One of the main motivating factors, as I mentioned a couple times, in adopting this code was to avoid direct government intervention. On March 31st, the MPPDA, Motion Pictures Producers Directors Association, agreed it would abide by the code. The code was divided into two parts. The first was a set of general principles, which was to prohibit a picture from lowering the moral standards of those who see it, so as not to wrongly influence a specific audience of viewers, including men, women, children, lower class people, and those of susceptible minds. Yes. And the code called for depictions of what they called, and they decided were the correct standards of life. Like they got together and said, this is what good people do, right? And lastly, it was strictly forbidden for motion picture to show any sort of ridicule for law or any sympathy for violating the law. Now, the second part was a set of particular applications, they said, which was a very exact list of items you could never show. So some restrictions, such as the ban on homosexuality or the use of specific curse words, were never directly mentioned, but they were assumed to be understood without any writing them down. And I think we all know what those words are. Basically all the words we don't use on this show. The code also contained an addendum commonly referred to as the advertising code, which regulated any sort of what we would today call product placement and things of that nature. Homosexuals were de facto included under the prescription of sex perversion. That was considered perversion. You could not show it at all. And the depiction of race mixing, okay, relationships of a sexual nature between black and white races was forbidden. Forget it. Not going to happen. It was also stated that the notion of an adults-only policy was not good enough because they didn't think they could enforce it. But it did allow that maturer minds may easily understand and accept without harm subject matter in plots that would harm younger people. So they did kind of say, look, if you're older and you know the world and things like that, but young people won't be able to figure that out. The code didn't just want to determine what you could show on screen, but they also, as I mentioned earlier, they wanted to promote traditional values. Sexual relations outside of marriage, which were forbidden to be portrayed as attractive or beautiful, were to be presented in a way that would not arouse passion or make them seem permissible. They didn't want, unless you were married, they didn't want any of that stuff to seem like it was a good idea, all right? Any sexual act considered perverted, including the suggestion of same-sex relationships, sex, or romance, just romance, was ruled out. I mentioned a second ago, this is a big one. All criminal action had to be punished, okay? And neither the crime nor the criminal could elicit any sympathy from the audience, okay? Now, the reason all of those movies, anybody that got away with something, because some of the movies, like the original movie Scarface or Public Enemy #1, these movies, the characters not only were very sympathetic, but during the Depression, these were people that were like, hey, what else was I going to do? I became a gangster. I couldn't afford to go to school. Nobody'd give me a job. And that in those times was thought to be, okay, well, you're just robbing from banks. People hated banks during the Depression. They hated them. So those characters were very sympathetic. So they had to pay for their crimes at the end of the movie, which normally meant that character was done away with. So the audience must be aware that behavior was wrong, usually through compensating moral value, which means there had to be really good people in the movie as well, do-gooders, and then they had to die at the end. Authority figures had to be treated with respect, and the clergy could not be portrayed as comic characters or villains, ever. Now, under some circumstances, the police, politicians, judges could be villains as long as it was clear that those people were exceptions to the rule. The entire code was written with Catholic undertones, and it was stated that art must be handled carefully because it could be morally evil in its effect, and its deep moral significance was unquestionable. They recognized that movies had a huge influence not only on specific people but society at large. Now, it was initially decided to keep the Catholic influence on the code a secret. You know, a recurring theme was that throughout a movie, the audience feels sure that evil is wrong and good is right. So one of the biggest problems they had, as I mentioned, was enforcing all this. And I mentioned Fatty Arbuckle and his scandal. He was the biggest talent in Hollywood. He was more popular than Charlie Chaplin, who was arguably the most famous actor in the world at the time of his scandal. And he was blacklisted from Hollywood, even though he later went on to direct movies sort of under the table, under a pseudonym called Will Be Good. Virginia Rapp was the name of the girl that he was allegedly with. She supposedly was with many different men. It was like a several-day party. And I won't get into the details of that. They're pretty famous, and they're very disgusting, even by this standards today. On February 19th, 1930, Variety, the movie magazine, right, published the entire content of the code and predicted that state film censorship boards would soon become obsolete. However, the men that were obliged to enforce the code, a guy named Jason Joy and his successor, James Wingate, were not really that enthusiastic about enforcing it. And they were very, very ineffective. A movie called The Blue Angel, okay? The Blue Angel was the first film they reviewed, and it wasn't revised, even though the California Film Board called it indecent. Although there were like instances where they would negotiate cuts from films where there were definite violations, a whole lot of very lurid material made it to the screen. Jason Joy had to review 500 films a year, and he had a little tiny staff, and he had no power whatsoever. He was willing to work with the studios, and because he did work with the studios, he ended up getting hired by 20th Century Fox. So, bye. The guy that replaced him, James Wingate, really tried to keep up with doing his job, but he was so slow at it that Daryl Zanuck, who was the Warner Brothers head of production, wrote him a letter that said, "Pick up the pace, buddy." In 1930, the Hayes office didn't have the authority to order the studios to remove material from a film. They just had to sort of reason and plead with them. And there you go. It's just the way it went. They didn't have any power. They couldn't do a darn thing about anything. One factor that led to the studios ignoring the code was that they found the code people to be prudish. And that was because the attitudes in the 20s and the 30s were crazy. People were going crazy back then. Bathtub gin, all of that stuff. the code was attacked really heavily by free speech groups as well. Big time. And also, it was the Great Depression during the 30s, and the studios were trying to get income any way they possibly could. And one of the ways was films containing racy and violent content. Those were big, high-ticket sales movies. So they were like, why should we stop doing this? And soon, the studios ignoring this code became a joke. The Hollywood Reporter actually mocked it and said that an anonymous screenwriter was quoted as saying, the Hays Moral Code is not even a joke anymore. It's just a memory. And 2 years later, the magazine Variety, they followed suit and said, well, we don't care about this. This is William Desmond Taylor, an actor that had been killed in an incredibly lurid, awful way. And by the way, here was the depiction of a firearm. This is from The Great Train Robbery. And he just pointed right at you, right at the screen, right? Right at the screen. Here's those two do-gooders. Look at those guys. Do those things look any fun to party with? No, they don't. Martin Quigley and Carter Haven. They don't look fun at all. On June 13th, 1934, an amendment to the code was adopted, which established the Production Code Administration, and it required all films released on or after July 1st, 1934, to obtain a seal of approval before being released. And this administration had offices in Hollywood and in New York. And the very first movie to get the seal of approval was a movie called The World Moves On. And then for over 30 years, every single motion picture produced in the United States adhered to the code. The code wasn't created or enforced by any federal, state, or city government. Hollywood studios adopted it. They were like, we're going to do this ourselves because we don't want the government to do it for us. That guy I told you about earlier, Father Daniel Lord, he was a Jesuit. He wrote, silent smut had been bad. Vocal smut cried to the censors for vengeance. There you go. There you go. One critic said the code was no mere list of thou shalt nots, but a homily that sought to yoke Catholic doctrine to Hollywood formula. The guilty are punished, the virtuous rewarded, and the authority of church and state is legitimate. The bonds of matrimony are sacred. What resulted has been described as a Jewish-owned business selling Roman Catholic theology to Protestant America. Now, this whole thing got really, really, really bad for the studios, actors, directors, when this guy came along. And he was very well known in the movie business. He was very well known in American society at large. This is Joseph Breen, a prominent Catholic layman who had worked in public relations, and he was promoted to the head of the Production Code Administration. Under his leadership, which lasted 20 years, enforcement of the Production Code became notoriously rigid. Even Betty Boop, you know, the cartoon character, she was a flapper, and she had to change her characteristic flapper personality and dress, adopting an old-fashioned, near matronly appearance. However, by 1934, the prohibition against race mixing was defined only as sexual relationships between black and white races. You couldn't do it, but at least they were kind enough to, actually say it. This here is Frankenstein. Okay? Now, Frankenstein came out in 1931, but the sequel, Bride of Frankenstein, arrived in 1935 when this Hays Code was in full effect, and the doctor's overt God complex was forbidden. In the first picture, when the creature was born, the mad scientist, Dr. Frankenstein, said, "Now I know what it feels like to be God." He couldn't do any of that stuff once the production code came along, and certainly when Joseph Breen came along. The first major instance of censorship under the production code involved the 1934 movie, believe it or not, Tarzan and His Mate. Yes, a Tarzan movie, of all things. There was a brief nude scene. Maureen O'Sullivan had a body double, and those were edited out of the master of the film. By the time the code became fully functional in January of 1935, several films from the pre-code era were pulled from release. And that also required the studios to remake films they had previously made and apply the code to them. One of the more famous ones was The Maltese Falcon. That classic movie with Humphrey Bogart, that's a remake. And they remade it because the previous version was too violent and too sexual. They also remade Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde because both of those movies, which had been released 10 years earlier, wouldn't pass the code. No, sir. Not even close. There were a lot of other famous examples, a Hitchcock movie named Rebecca. And the production code also engaged in political censorship. When Warner Brothers wanted to make a film about Nazi concentration camps, the production office said, "You can't do that because we do not allow people to depict in an unfavorable light another country's institutions and prominent people." And they said, if you go ahead with this, we will take it to the federal government. And that policy by the Production Code Administration and the Hays Code prevented a number of anti-Nazi films from being produced. Thanks, Hays Code. Breen's power to enforce the code, it actually allowed him to change scripts, and that angered many writers and directors and Hollywood heads. Breen influenced the production of Casablanca. And I know many of you may have seen Casablanca, and you think, what's bad about that movie? There's nothing. Well, he objected to any explicit reference that Rick and Elsa slept together in Paris, or the film mentioning that Captain Renault, got sexual favors from people. And ultimately, they had to strongly imply that in the finished version of the movie. Adherence to the code also ruled out any possibility of the film ending with Rick and Ilsa consummating their adultery. And that's what caused the ending of Rick's noble, problems with three people don't amount to a hill of beans, and it's crazy, and that whole thing. Some people did find various advantages, if you will, to the code. They thought it made them more inventive, right? Newsreels were mostly exempt from the code. That's, where people got a lot of their news. Their content was generally toned down by the end of 1934. And as a result of the public outrage over the coverage of the killings of John Dillinger and of Babyface Nelson, the code came into play and said you can't show a bunch of horrible, violent stuff in the newsreels now. One of the most famous defiances of the code, somebody saying, hey, forget you, we're doing this anyway, was the case of The Outlaw, a Western produced by Howard Hughes, which was denied a seal of approval after it was completed in 1941, since advertising focused particular attention on Jane Russell's breasts, which you can see here in the movie poster. When the film's initial 1943 release was shut down by the Motion Pictures Producers and Distributors Association after a week, Howard Hughes eventually persuaded Joseph Breen this did not violate the code, and the film could be shown without the seal of approval. And that did happen. But it didn't happen until 1946, 5 years later. That's how long the fight with the Hays Code went on. By the way, Jane Russell, we're not mad at you at all. Just saying. What do we got here? I'll leave this picture up for a second for you, fellas. Let's see here. Chef said everybody heard and said thank you. Well, no, you're welcome. Stribbs is here. He says happy to be here. Happy to see you. Guido Samurai says happy to be here. Catholic influence on the code, a secret. Was the 10 Commandments of film hidden from the public? Guido Samurai, the commandments weren't hidden from the public. The thou shalt nots and the be carefuls and all that. However, the 10 Commandments came under scrutiny of the code, and I'll tell you about that in just a second. Turkatron is here. Turkatron, always good to see you. There's things I would say, but they would be doxing in nature, so I'm not going to say them. Guido Samurai says, so Robert Anton Wilson was right about everything is what I have learned from this episode. Maybe. Sukium Dyke says, hell yeah, Tom is live. I am live. Crappy at Life says, hell yeah, I love the Hays Code. No, you should not love the Hays Code. Well, it's no longer in existence, so you don't have to like it or not. The David O. Selznick production of Duel in the Sun, featuring several on-screen deaths, adultery, and displays of lust, was also released in 1946 without the approval of the Hays office. Now, see, the Hays office had tons of power, but if they kind of looked the other way, if one of the studios kind of made them look the other way, then they could be released. However, the people showing the movies might not show them. In other words, they release the movie, it's available to a movie theater, but the movie theater or movie theater chain might go, nah, they're a little too racy for us. Anyway, the financial success of both The Outlaw and Duel in the Sun was a deciding factor in the weakening of the code in the late 40s, when the formerly taboo subjects of grape and miscegenation were allowed in a movie called Johnny Belinda, and also a movie, and that was 1948, a movie called Pinky in 1949, respectively. In 1951, the code was revised to make it more rigid because they saw that they were kind of losing control, and they spelled out more prohibited words and subjects. Now, I should point out that the code was able to almost blacklist not just movies, but actors that were known to be lewd and licentious in their private life, if not on screen, screenwriters, directors. So what you did outside of a movie even was cause for Breen and the Hays Code to go, nah, I don't think we're going to go along with that. Also in 1951, MGM had Louis B. Mayer, and he was a very strong ally of Joseph Breen. He was kicked out after a series of disputes with the studio's production head, whose preference for gritty social realism films was always getting them in trouble with the Hays office. Well, Breen retired in 1954, and Hollywood continued to work within the confines of the production code through the late 40s and 50s. But there was a problem. There was a big problem on the horizon. And that was the film industry had serious competition from a couple of threats. The first one was television. And that, TV owners could stay home for their entertainment. And they could also see motion pictures on television. And so Hollywood had to offer the public something it could not see on television, which was federally regulated. And it was under a more restrictive code than the movies were. In addition to the threat of television, the movie industry was having a period of economic difficulties. Studios were forced to give up the ownership of theaters. The studios actually owned theaters. And they were also unable to control what people exhibited because they didn't own the theaters anymore. And this led to increasing competition from foreign movies, which didn't have any ties to a production code. So foreign movies were seen at the time as a lot more racy. And you could just say, oh, I saw a foreign film. That means you saw a film that was off the charts, more sexy and stuff and things. Two Swedish films. Let's see here. Two Swedish films. Come on now. I've got this movie here. I know I do. There it is. There it is. Two Swedish films, One Summer of Happiness and Ingmar Bergman's Summer with Monica, were released in 1955 as exploitation movies. And they were so successful that a huge wave of sexually provocative European movies came to American theaters. Some British movies, as a matter of fact, like, there was a movie called Victim, and another movie called A Taste of Honey, and another one called The Leather Boys, challenged traditional gender roles and openly confronted prejudices against homosexuals. And these were major violations of the production code. The post-war years also saw gradual, moderate liberalization of American culture. In 1956, two movies, The Bad Seed and a movie called Baby Doll, generated huge controversy involving the production code. The first dealt with the deaths of children, including that of the wicked child Rhonda at the end, which that's horribly killed, which had been the result of changing the ending from the original novel to abide with the code's crime must not pay rule. So in that instance, the code actually made them do bad things. On the other hand, the Baby Doll was hugely attacked by religious and moral leaders because of its provocative publicity, which you see before you now, and ridiculed law enforcement and used racial epithets in it like crazy. It was also considered a little hypocritical because the movie The Ten Commandments was released the same year, And it had a ton of sexuality and all sorts of lurid stuff in it. It has to. There had to be sin in order for there to be religion, you know, in the commandments. And it didn't get any sort of criticism from the code. None. Ixnay. None. At all. During the 50s, studios found ways of complying with the code while also circumventing it. Columbia Pictures, for example, bought an art house distributor which specialized in importing foreign art films. Okay? So they owned the company, but they didn't do it themselves, and they would use this side company to distribute movies like And God Created Woman, which was just way off the code. And Columbia had an agreement with the Motion Picture Association of America, so they couldn't distribute it. But the agreement that they had didn't say that a subsidiary of theirs could do it. So United Artists did the same thing with a distributor that they had. Explicit sexuality became expected in foreign movies to an extent that foreign film, art film, adult film, sex film, they were basically the same thing. And beginning in the late 50s, a ton, and I mean a ton, of movies were, there's In God Created Woman, that's Brigitte Bardot, that's just way off the code. But a lot of increasingly explicit movies began to appear, like Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, which was a very sultry, sexy, simmering movie. Suddenly Last Summer, which is another movie with a lot of in it. Psycho, which many people remember for the famous shower scene. But Psycho is a movie that begins with John Gavin and Janet Leigh having an illicit rendezvous. They've obviously just been, and John Gavin is married. They discuss the fact that he has to get a divorce. So they're having not only, but also an affair, adultery. And then there's the violence, which you don't actually see the blade, touch your skin, all that, but still pretty violent. And then cross-dressing, with Tony Perkins. So that movie, that's way off the charts. Another movie called Dark at the Top of the Stairs, and these all dealt with adult subjects, sexual matters that hadn't been seen in Hollywood since the code began in 1934, back when things were crazy. Now, the MPAA very, very reluctantly granted the seal of approval for all of those movies, but not until they made them change certain things. But, I don't know how many things got changed, because all those movies are very lurid. A movie that didn't get a seal of approval was Billy Wilder's Some Like It Hot, a classic. And it didn't get the seal of approval. They released it anyway, and it became a box office smash, which further weakened the authority of the Hays Code. Also at the forefront of contesting the code was a legendary director named Otto Preminger, whose films violated the code repeatedly in the 50s. His 1953 film, The Moon is Blue, about a young woman who tries to play two suitors off against each other by claiming she plans to keep her virginity until marriage, was released without a seal of approval by United Artists. The very first production distributed by a member of the Motion Picture Association to ever do this. You know, he later remade The Man with the Golden Arm, that Frank Sinatra movie about a guy doing heroin. Frank Sinatra doing heroin. Drug abuse. And then he released another classic, Anatomy of a Murder, with Jimmy Stewart and Lee Remick, which dealt with murder and grape. Like Some Like It Hot, these were direct assaults on the authority of the production code, and their success moved the demise of the production code along, which was amazing because it had been so much in control of Hollywood for so very long. And I mean dictating to the movies what they were going to do. What's going on in our chat room here? What are you hunyucks doing in here? Sukium Dyke says, so just like today, Suki, I am live 6 days a week. Saturday and Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern, and have been for what? Over a year, maybe 2 years now. Thank you for asking. Thank you for asking. In 1964, there was a movie about the Holocaust called The Pawnbroker, directed by Sidney Lumet and starring Rod Steiger, which was initially rejected because of two scenes in which actresses Linda Geiser and Thelma Oliver fully expose their upper mammalian carriage, and also because of a sex scene between Oliver and Jaime Sanchez that was described as unacceptably sex-suggestive and lustful. Now, despite this rejection, the film's producers arranged for allied artists to release the film without the production code seal, with the New York censors licensing the film without the cuts demanded by the code. The producers appealed the rejection to the Motion Picture Association of America. They basically appealed the code. On a 6-3 vote, the MPAA granted the film an exception conditional on reduction in the length of the scenes, which were found unapprovable. The requested reductions of nudity were minimal, and the outcome was viewed in the media as a victory for the film's producers. And The Pawnbroker was the first film featuring bare breasts to receive production code approval. The exception to the code was granted as a special and unique case and was described by the New York Times at the time as an unprecedented move that will not, however, set a precedent. But the days of the production code, those 3 decades where they ruled roost, were coming to a close. In 1963, Motion Picture Association of America President Eric Johnston, who had previously liberalized the code, he died. And the next 3 years were marked by a power struggle between two factions, which led to a very erratic application of the Hays Code. Finally, the liberal faction prevailed by 1966, installing Jack Valente as the association's new head. It's amazing to me to even say the words Jack Valente is liberal, because he might have been by 1966 standards, but as time went along, not too long, he was seen as really an old fuddy-duddy and very awful, you know. And he's one of the people that had a hand in developing the rating system that we have now, and being a jerk about it, I might add. In 1966, Warner Brothers released a movie called Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, the first film to feature the Suggested for Mature Audiences label. As the Hays Code was divided about censoring the film's explicit language, Jack Valenti negotiated a compromise. The word screw was removed, but other language remained, including the phrase hump the hostess. The film, and that was seen as, oh my God, whoa, look out. The film received production code approval despite the previously prohibited language. And if you haven't seen Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, see it today. It's a brilliant, brilliant movie. That very same year, the British-produced, American-financed film Blow Up was denied approval for its various instances of nudity, foreplay, and intercourse. MGM released it anyway under a specially created pseudonym, Premiere Productions. This was the first instance of an MPAA member company directly producing a film without a seal approval. Also, the original lengthy code was replaced by a list of 11 points outlining the boundaries of the new code that would be current community standards and good taste. Any film containing content deemed unsuitable for older audiences would feature the suggested for mature audiences label in its advertising. The surviving 1930 to 1968 records of the Production Code Administration, some 20,000 papers comprising files on over 5,000 films, were donated to the Margaret Herrick Library of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences in 1987. And we covered this on a show. We did the whole rating system. That went into effect November 1st, 1968. I won't go through all that with you. It's in that show. In 1969, a film, oh boy, this was a big one. This was a big one in terms of codes and censorship. A film from Sweden called I Am Curious Yellow, directed by Vilgo Sjöman, was initially banned in the U.S. for its frank description of sexuality. However, this was overturned by the Supreme Court. In 1970, because of confusion over the meaning of mature audiences, it was turned into parental suggestion and guidance and blah, 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 blah. Also, one of the things that a lot of people point to as a benefit to the Hays Code was the American Humane Association depended on the Hays Office for the right to monitor the sets used for production. And the closure of the Hays Office in 1966 corresponded with an increase in animal cruelty on movie sets. And the association did not regain its access to monitor movie sets for 14 years until 1980. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is really all I have to tell you about the very constrictive, the reason that in old movies you will see a guy light a woman's cigarette very suggestively and stuff. That was the Hays Code. He couldn't just walk up to her and put his arm around her and kiss her or anything like that. So they had to do this, a lot of different things to take the place of normal human behavior. So you went from that to a lot of very, 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 and this, to what we have in the movies today, which is pretty much anything you want. Pretty much anything you want to show. Yeah. So there you are. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what I have to tell you about the very restrictive, Catholic-dominated, overly moral Hays Code, where guy blows in a girl's ear, and that movie can't be released. What? But going so far as to have guys out working in the sun and you couldn't have them with their shirts off. You know, maybe you could show a guy with his shirt off if he was Tarzan or if he was jumping into a pool, which Tarzan did. He was Johnny Weissmuller. He was an Olympic swimmer. But there you go. A couple other quick things real quick that are quick. This week, coming up tomorrow, will be Hullabaloo, the rockinest, grooviest, coolest music show that you could possibly watch from the 1960s. Then also, next week, here's what we got. Monday, we've got this case going on right now with the kidnapping of Savannah Guthrie's mother. Well, I'm going to cover on Monday the very first and largest kidnapping case in the history of ever, and that is the Lindbergh kidnapping. Charles Lindbergh's baby kidnapped. On Tuesday, we will cover the Confederate Army's submarine, the Hunley. It blew up a ship and everything. And we will cover not only the Hunley, its construction, the very many tragedies that they had getting the Hunley to work, and its mystery, which was solved after decades and decades and decades and decades. On Wednesday, we will cover the siege at Waco, which was a request from a listener. If you remember David Koresh, the Branch Davidians, and the siege that went on in Waco, Texas, we will cover that. On Thursday, we will cover the disappearance of Tiffany Sessions, also a request from folks. On a week from today, Saturday, we'll cover the amazing career of Agnes Moorehead. You know her as Endora from Bewitched. So much more than that. An incredible actress. And then a week from today, we will cover, I got a right to pick a little fight, Bonanza, the TV show Bonanza. So that's what we got. If you could like, share, subscribe, retweet, notification bell, man, would we appreciate it. All those absolutely free things that you can do to help our show out with the algorithm, the almighty, all-powerful algorithm. We would appreciate it. I don't see any other chats in the chat room. If you got something you want to say, now's the time to say it, because if not, I'm putting a fork in this baby. That's why movies weren't dirty. It's also why, when they established the rating system, people went crazy. It was like, Midnight Cowboy won an Academy Award. It was an X-rated movie because they had an X rating at the time. Also, Clockwork Orange was a rated X movie when it came out. So they were like, well, we can. They did away with X because the adult film industry kind of took over the triple X, and they were like, we don't want to be associated with that. So then it became MA, mature audiences, various other things. But that's why, I think it was the Brian De Palma version of Scarface was originally given a much more violent rating, and he had to make cuts to it in order to get it to be R-rated so people could go see it or would go see it. So, but that's after the rating system came out. They thought the rating system would be a way to kind of keep things in check. They were only half right, because it also became a way for people to just make movies crazy with violence and blood and gore and, sexual themes and nudity, a lot more nudity. So the Hays Code, though, stamped that down and made things just puritanical, as you can possibly imagine. So anyway, that's the Hays Code. Aren't you glad you know about that now? That's why movies were just so wholesome back then. That's why in all these movies that you see from the old timies, there were 2 beds in the bedroom. Man had his bed, the woman had her bed. That's why, even if they were married, they had 2 separate beds. The Hays Code is why. Yeah. Just so that they didn't get the idea that, that anybody was doing it. If you know what that means. All right, I don't see anything in the chat room, so I'm looking at that old clock on the wall, and it says about time for me to amscray. Like, share, subscribe, retweet, notification bell, please, please, please. Oh, God, please. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. Tomorrow we'll be covering Hullabaloo. Sonny and Cher, The Lovin' Spoonful, Sammy Davis Jr., Michael Landon, Jerry Lewis, Jerry and the Pacemakers. Bunch of different bands. Oh, famous dancers were on that. Some of the dancers on Hullabaloo later went on to be famous Broadway dancers and stuff. It's a lot of stuff going on with Hullabaloo. So with all that being said, I'd like to mention once again that no, the chef does not work at that other place I mentioned. The chef and Mikey and the rest of them, they work at Geraldine's. When in Indianapolis, guests of the Tom Gulley Show eat at Geraldine's, just off Fountain Square there on English Avenue. Look at that, steak and steak frites, and oh my God, look at that. That's a dirty chitini. Doesn't that look just refreshing and wonderful? There's the scallopini of some kind. I don't know what it is. Somebody else can tell me. There's a Wagyu beef steak of some kind. It looks like a tomahawk. I don't know what it is. Then there's another delicious cut of meat with delicious things around it. And then here's those spinach puffs they've got there at Geraldine's that are all the rage. Let me tell you, they're all the rage. So that's where those guys work, Geraldine's. And you should go to the Geraldine's website because there's some really great pictures of the inside, and it's actually fabulous. Lelit is here, guest of the Tom Gulley Show. Eat at Whataburger, and you know it. Well, I said when in Indianapolis. I'm pretty sure they don't have a Whataburger in Indianapolis. Guests of the Tom Gulley Show eat at Strouderosa in Lake Highlands. Although they're welcome to eat at Whataburger, nobody's going to turn that down. They eat at Strouderosa, the best kept secret in northeast Dallas. Strib says, I always enjoy Geraldine's when I'm in Indianapolis. There you go, Stribs. Thank you. Thank you. And who wouldn't? Who wouldn't? I had somebody begging me to come back to Indianapolis just, 12 hours ago on a phone call. And I thought, it's 16 degrees there. There's only a couple months out of the year I even want to be in Indianapolis anymore. But if I ever was to come back, I would eat at Geraldine's. On the house. Can't afford that. No, I'm kidding. It's a wonderful place. And Indianapolis's premier steakhouse. There's a place downtown that claims to be old, and they're no Geraldine's. They've had the same menu there since Jack Dempsey was visiting. That's fine. It's if you want that sort of thing. But if you want the upscale dining experience in Indianapolis, you go to Geraldine's. Also, when you go to Geraldine's, the chef and Mikey and the rest of them, hold on, I'll tell you who the rest of them are. Why do I get so many notifications when I'm on the air here? When I'm not on the air, I don't get any notifications. Boy, when I'm on the air, I get them out the wazoo. There, I said it. Wazoo. Let's see here. There's Randy. Let's see here. Sometimes he tells me. Come on. Let's see. Mikey. I always remember Mikey. And then there's Cooper, Neil. I think there's a Josh or a Jason. The whole crew. The entire crew. Over at Geraldine's. Your home for delicious steaks and other things when in Indianapolis. Look them up. And why not just book a trip to Indianapolis just to go to Geraldine's? You know? Heck, on the outro of the show tonight, I'm going to go ahead and play a song with the chef in it. How about that? So with all that being said, till next time, we'll see you next time.
Tom steps in shining, lifting spirits in the room. The wolf's already laughing with that friendly boom. Chef's in the kitchen, keeping everybody fed. Scott from Australia nods his bearded head. Rumple trench coat enters with a mystery to unfold. Tom brings the warmth, turning every moment gold. Once you go gully, you never recover fully. When the world feels unsteady, Tom will get you ready. Once you go gully, you never recover fully. Tom puts on the show, let the good times roll. The wolf keeps up grooving with that easy midnight sway. Chef spins a ladle like when leading cabaret. Scott from Australia brings the thunder to the floor. Rumpled trench coat squints like he's seen this all before. Tom hits the rhythm and the whole room starts to move. Every single heartbeat falling deeper in the groove. Once you go gully, you never recover fully. When the world feels unsteady, Tom will get you ready. Once you go gully, you never recover fully. Tom puts on the show, let the good times roll. Oh, hey, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. When the lights turn low, Tom keeps the moment bright, lifting every spirit as they dance into the night. Once you go gully, you never recover fully. When the world feels unsteady, Tom will